Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to, oh no, I'm cut off here. Sorry, I had my document. And I started, and here I am. That I don't have the, can I get some help with the opening statement, because the picture I took cut it off.
Yes, Mary will bring us in just a second. Fun.
I will also add that I am a part of the brick trend, and it's blocking me from getting that here.
One moment, listen to the bells for bells.
Yeah, that's good too.
Yeah.
And Mary, are you just emailing it to me? Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. If I can get through the first bullet point, I've got the rest to do a better picture. Sorry, got two. Okay. Good afternoon. To the members of the public present, welcome to Mobile GR Commission meeting. The Commission provides input on mobility-related activities and programs to department staff and also makes recommendations to City Commission on policies related to these activities. As members of the public, you have one opportunity where you can provide comments. You will have an opportunity at the end of the meeting where you can provide general comments. We are not able to respond to your comments directly. We are listening and using your feedback to inform our decisions. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Can we get a roll call?
Okay.
Hatton,
Here.
Sessa,
Here.
Rohr,
Here.
Whistling,
Here.
Rye, Miguel Cipriano,
Present.
Weiler,
Here.
Armbruster,
Here.
LeGrand,
Yep.
Kowalka,
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then can I get an approval of the minutes from the February 2026 meeting?
Support.
All right, we have a motion. I'm sorry, I should have asked any comment on. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Carries. It appears we have no petitions and communications nor action items, so we'll move right into discussions.
Thank you, Chair. So today we have two items for discussion, the mobility blueprint. We want to bring you a status update, and then also the transportation demand management program update that we're working on. I want to start with the mobility blueprint. There is a memo in your packet, and I'm going to hand this over to Max. Max is managing this process, and he'll let you know where we're at and what's the next steps.
Yeah, thank you. Just a high-level overview of the mobility blueprint. This is a long-range kind of project that we are working for to really get a good understanding of and a development of a plan that will be data-driven, community-informed, and a framework to guide all of our future mobility projects, policies, and investments. And we're happy to have a discussion here. I think that's the primary goal of this discussion item, is to talk with you about your thoughts, potential concerns or questions you may have. But I do want to kind of provide an update specifically of where we're at in that project's development. We have recently issued a request for proposal on March 5th of 2026 to get proposals related to helping with getting some qualified consulting firms to assist in the development of this plan and this blueprint. And I'm just going to kind of read these key elements of the scope included, because we spent a lot of time to make sure that these are very intentional. So just to cover that, we are looking in this request for technical analysis of transportation systems performance here in Grand Rapids and the surrounding area. That includes infrastructure conditions, assessing our mobility networks and the gaps that exist there, and then the needs, the transportation needs for the city. A data-driven project prioritization methodology and multimodal transportation modeling in tandem. I think both of those working together and identifying that as a crucial part of this plan, especially as we look towards capital investment. Community engagement and stakeholder input. We want to build off the community master plan and the amazing work that our city has done in that effort. We don't want to go back to community and once again ask, what do you want for your transportation plan? I think that is clear if we look at all of our area-specific plans, our city-wide plans, our regional plans at the Grand Valley Metro Council level. That's clear. So this is about how we implement that and how we engage with community and make sure that we have heard them and that we are implementing what they want. But at the same time, we still want to do engagement to make sure we're aligned on that implementation, and of course working with stakeholder groups such as this one and many others. The near-term project cost estimates, so this is like looking 1 to 5 years out, and that was something, even if this is a long-term plan, we don't know the exact length, but let's say it's a 20-year plan, we'll be doing this repeatedly throughout the plan to make sure that we're always doing near-term cost estimates, and that includes phased investment plans and development of this multi-year capital improvement plan. And then identification of grant-ready project opportunities and potential funding sources, being prepared for these, especially from a high-level strategic lens, is really, really crucial to make sure that we're getting as much funding as we can from grant sources. And then a living blueprint document. This is kind of an overarching, but this is covering the vision, the equity, emerging trends, and implementation. So we want to be very comprehensive with this. We understand there's I wouldn't say an infinite number of elements, but there's many, many elements to a plan that involves such a complicated topic as transportation. So we want to make sure that we're involving as many elements as we can and that are appropriate. So this is very comprehensive. So anyway, we are putting out this proposal. We are expecting them to be, well, we know that they're due on March 27th, and we're expecting to review that at that time, and then hopefully we're going to have something that we can bring to our city commission, and pending their approval, we will expect contract execution and work on this project to begin around May and June. So all that being said, we have a few things we'd like to talk about today, and so I'm just going to go over those quickly and then we can kind of start. So the first one is to invite commissioners to highlight any priorities, concerns, or community considerations they would like staff to keep in mind during the planning and engagement process for this Mobility Blueprint project. And the second one is to invite and determine if any commissioners on this board would like to serve as representatives with the Mobile GR, or representatives of the Mobile GR Commission on that request for proposals process. So the city does individual reviewers who review all the proposals and score them, and we would love to invite some assistance on that through that review process. And then finally, we can talk about if there's any questions and other stuff. But first, if anyone is interested, we'd love to hear thoughts and kind of questions on that topic.
Thanks, Nick. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts?
Do you have a proposed budget for this, or an idea of what you're targeting for this, or are you wait to see what the proposals come back as?
Let me say it this way. So often when you do a public request for proposals, you can choose either to tell the budget up front, or you can choose not to do that. And I chose not to do that within this RFP because I did not want to color the respondents' dreams, right? So I wanted respondents on the scope of work and to come back to us with a cost proposal without saying, this is what our budget is. That being said, we are a public entity, right? And so when I speak with the city commission about this, we will talk through budgets and things if that happens. So that's why I've refrained from saying this is our budget. So, but we are prepared for a healthy budget. Past life as a consultant, so was our assistant director, Ariana, and we did our own little mock-up of scope. So we feel confident that we have money set aside that we can take care of this.
Flexibility then to
I think so, because we've never done this before in the city, right? So there are things that I probably haven't thought about, so I wanted to give a lot of flexibility to consultants. That's a very long-winded answer to the question. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, great.
I'm glad you have the flexibility to.
Yeah, you bet.
Scale it to where you need to be.
So Commissioner Miguel Cipriano, and then Mayor LaGrant, and then Commissioner Gore.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like seeing all the new hires and postings that have come up with Mobile GR. Could you help us understand maybe where the gap is in the staff and the need to go outside to hire a consultant for this? And how might we get to a point where we no longer have to seek outside help for this and go internal?
Yeah, okay.
So first, I will say, we have spent a considerable amount of staff time on this already, and we have at Mobile GR 7+ employees who this is going to be a main part of their work. We also have an internal team at the city that is upwards of, at times, we've done an hour estimate, dozens of hours of their work that will be dedicated to this process. So just knowing the number of tasks that we have been asked to do at the city and in general, we're just realistic that we think this would be a much more effective effort if we seek outside assistance. So there will be a considerable amount of staff time in this project already, and this is a very collaborative effort between the consultant and staff. But I just think when we looked at the scope of work and everything from just measuring existing conditions alone is just exceeded the realistic levels that I felt comfortable as the project manager for this. Again, I think this is absolutely not something where we're saying we're just going to have a consultant do it on the outside. This is very much a collaborative effort, and we will be spending, again, our estimates are, and we already have spent dozens of hours, but our estimates are looking at the months, especially around these summer months, and then in the fall, we're going to be spending a significant amount of city staff time in this, even with the assistance, but without it, I don't think it would be sustainable, and it would impact the outcome of the effort.
That being said, I'd love to join the review. The committee. I'm on your side. I've just been, I don't know what's the right word. A lot of the work, the consultant work that I end up seeing in the city, it's just leaves me wanting more.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think what has helped is working with Jessica and Ariana, who have seen it from that other side, and being very clear on what we expect and what we're looking for. We've had a lot of that work that we've talked about is making sure this RFP was really thorough and clear. And I think we're going to have, because we have this dedicated staff time, we're going to have a lot of really collaborative discussions with them. So there's not misalignment or misunderstanding or wasted energy or efforts on this. So definitely hear you, and I feel you on that one. And I think we're just being really intentional to make sure that doesn't happen here.
Thank you.
The other thing I would add to that, I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking. The other thing I would add is that with this type of work, it's highly specialized. And even municipal transportation planners who are specialists, they are specialists in this city and in our system. And typically, at a city this size, and a staff of our size, we don't have those types of, I would say, experts on staff. And so it's very helpful to go out and have teams come in to help you with these types of things. So I would always recommend the staff of this size without dedicated specialists in things like modeling and really in-depth foundational transportation planning. If we had already completed much of the foundational transportation planning and policy work that the city needs right now, we might be able to get to a place where something like this could be done in-house. But it's very rare that a municipality of our size, and even municipalities much larger, we looked at some other municipalities that are doing this type of work that are 7 times our size. And they also hire specialists to come in and help with this work. So, but I think it's a really great question, and it's one a lot of folks are curious about because we have a lot of, we have great staff. We have a good sized staff for the city that we are. Why is this not something that we do ourselves? So I thank you for asking.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on that, we did reach out to a number of communities and asked on their, what they learned from that experience too, from the city staff perspective. So yes, definitely want to learn from that, how we can best have that relationship.
A number of things. First of all, I'm hoping that you've not just put this out for an RFP, but know some people in the space who you hope would be interested in this reached out and given them the high sign, right? Because you've got a fairly tight timeline here, so, but I'm not even gonna ask you about that. The one thing that I'm glad to hear you talking about costs for actual implementation. You know, often I worry that a good idea is just a good idea, but if you don't scale it up to the scale of the need, right? Like if you do 2 blocks worth of work in a really big city, you haven't really done anything to the scale of the need. So I'm glad about that. I also hope that you're talking with DGRI, because they are, I mean, I happen to be on that board, just so the rest of you know, and they just went through, they're in the consulting hiring process for a consultant firm about like, how do we think about the downtown, ecosystem in the next few years, and they've got a great consultant already tapped who's done work around the country. And I actually absolutely think that getting a consultant here is good, not just because you only have 7 staff, but because there are, people around the continent working on this, and there are other cities around the continent, and we can't import, the staff from Cleveland to come here and tell us about their great ideas. But one way to cross-pollinate ideas with other urban core is to bring in people who are working in many cities, who can say, well, we did this in Cleveland, or we did this in Albuquerque, or whatever. I mean, we're probably all reading a lot of the same articles, but obviously, people who specialize in this kind of visioning are able to bring in other cities' experiences. It just comes with them. It's part of what you're getting, so that's great. The one thing I'll just flag is sort of, I think, a potential tension that we have with the master plan too, which is when you talk about something that has a scale of years, I at least don't always want to make sure that we consider on the forefront the ability to do experimental stuff while we wait for the finished product, so that we don't stop doing the work that we want to do. And if we can see clear things that can be done to make things better next month, that we don't say, oh, let's wait on that stuff until we get the consultant report a year from now or whatever. Because I think you're, and again, I've said this before, Jessica, I think you absolutely got this right. We need this plan, but this is scale of years, not scales of weeks. So just want to make sure this group can keep focusing on things we can do in the meantime too. Maybe that's something where this group can have more, like we become more useful in the near term than in the long term if we've got a long-term plan, consultants in place. Like I would hope that this group could start thinking in the 6-month horizon a little more than it otherwise would maybe if we got this planning process in place. So that's
Great.
Really just a long statement.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I adjust them in order, but if I miss anything, please let me know. So actually, I'm going to go a little out of order. First, about DGRI. Mark Miller was on our internal stakeholder group, so he's been involved in this process since the beginning. We also met with them to talk specifically about the interaction with the GR4 plan. Overall, just area-specific, regional-specific plans, we read all of them. We looked at how they would all interact with this. We really wanted to be a gap filler, not a replacer of duplicating efforts, so that we were very intentional about that. And obviously, DGRI and many other partners like GVMC and other folks we are speaking with frequently and will throughout this process.
Can I mention something about with our DGRI collaboration? It is not a coincidence that we are on the timeline that this plan is on, and that DGRI has begun their GR Forward update. Before they did that, they invited us to have a conversation about the scope of their work. I let them know this was our plan coming forward, and we were going to be lining up about the same time. And so we worked together, and they have, as part of their team and their scope, they asked for their consultant team to bring a dedicated person to coordinate with the city's mobility blueprint, because they knew this was coming. So they've done that, and like Max was saying, we did sit down and chat with them recently. I just want to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the first thing you mentioned really hits home to me, and it's something that when we were first talking about this project and I read all of these plans, I noticed there is not a lack at all of vision and strategy and high level, but there is a really large gap, at least in my opinion, through this assessment, in that implementation. Like, how do we do it? How do we get there? We know where we want to go, but that in between, we know we're not where we're at. not where we want to be, and we know where we want to be, but that in between of how we get there, there's a lot of, at least from my perspective, a lot of missing gaps there. So that's a really intentional part of this work, is that we're going to try to fill those gaps specifically around implementation and how we do it. And then to your final point, so this is a long-term effort from, in a lot of perspectives, maybe short-term from a city perspective, we talk 18 months, but we totally get that, and I think we're going to be very intentional about if we learn something, valuable in the first week, we're not going to just be like, well, let's wait till the plan's done until we help implement that. So doing in tandem with our other work is crucial, and again, something we're being very intentional about, that we're not just saying we're pausing everything until we figure out this long-term plan. We're going to be doing that incrementally and throughout. So great points, and I just want to say we agree.
Before Commissioner Murad, I do want to acknowledge that after Commissioner Murad, we'll have Commissioner Sessa, so I did miss Commissioner Sessa. Okay.
Did you want to go first? I think you had your hand up first.
No, I actually didn't. You can go first.
First off, thanks a lot for presenting this to us. This is good. I have two questions. One, to my fellow commissioner that asked about the budget. I guess what I would ask is, would we at least be able to know what the budget is that that you're going to be asking them to work within, or the range? Not necessarily, I'm sure it's not a hard cap, right? You're looking for proposals, so there could be a range. That's the one that I think we should at least know what that is, just so that we have that, so we understand what constraints we would also be working under as we make advice. The other thing, it seems like this is really open-ended. I think this is a really brief memorandum. As you note right at the top, brief overview. Could we at least get a sense of what kinds of gaps you're trying to cover, so that we could have a better idea in providing input back to say, yeah, we agree with that, no, we don't agree with that, and, it's just advice, but, we'd like to understand, because right now, I mean, I can think of, right off the top of my head, 3 or 4 different gaps in the entire blueprint or in the entire network, but I don't know if that's feasible to get them covered. One of them is the bus routes, the way they run. I mean, I don't know that they all make the most sense in the world if we want to get more people on buses, but that may also not be feasible. So I just think we have to have a sense of what gaps we're trying to cover.
Max has asked me to answer the budget question. So the other thing, and I think I left this out, is because this is a public RFP, the approval of that goes to the city commission, to the fiscal committee, and that's where you'll see that number. And so what we'll generally do is look and see what the price proposals come back. And if everything is wildly outside of what I had anticipated, or, the team here, the proposal review team is anticipating, then we'll have a conversation about that internally and kind of figure out what to do next. And typically, your scope drives the budget, right? We would need to narrow down the scope to match some sort of budget. And the reason why I hesitate to give you any numbers or any range is because if I speak that number or that range, that is what your teams will drive towards. And this is a public meeting, and they're listening. The smart teams are listening, right? They've been following along, and they're interested. So that is that's a common withheld piece of information. So you all, even as proposal reviewers, you won't have to worry about the cost proposal side. Generally, that's something that the cost proposal, I'll take a look at it and see whether or not it makes sense. And we're looking at things like what is the average hourly cost of the consultant that they're bringing, right? So, and you sort of look at, are there any outliers and things like that? So I understand the concern, but focusing on the scope, and this is how a proposal process works, focusing on the scope, and then the criteria for how the proposal came through and did. That's what you'll take a look at, and then we'll get to the cost factor later. And that will be a big piece of that, is the city commission saying, yes, you should commit these resources to it or not. We're a very lucky department. We have some resources set aside for this sort of thing, but we are also, during this year's budget process, are going forward with specific asks to spend this money on this thing, and that's up to the city commission. And I apologize that I don't have just a quick answer for your question, because I understand the curiosity and how that can be helpful and valuable.
And then for the second part of the question, is Like I said, we are looking to fill gaps on a number of different plans throughout, so I can't go into all of them, although if there are specific questions about specific plans, I will, if that's interested. But the main one we're looking at is the community master plan. I think we did, a little biased probably, but I think we did a fantastic job as a city. I wasn't involved in it, so I can say it. Fantastic job as a city, speaking with community and really hearing what they feel is necessary, specifically for mobility. So they called that section the balanced mobility, and I'm just going to read exactly kind of the overall summary was a transportation system that is safe, connected, equitable, and supports multiple modes of travel, not just cars. And they go into more detail there, so obviously it's not just as high level as that, but what we're going to look for gap-wise is figuring out how do we implement that. And not just how do we implement, but how do we prioritize that implementation. So if we're saying we really want to focus on filling this gap this way, then we need to figure out what's the first thing that we should focus on. And especially when we're talking about understandably limited resources. We don't have unlimited money, and we don't have unlimited staff time. We don't have unlimited street space. So there are a number of different prioritization conversations that need to happen. So while the community master plan did a fantastic job of laying out what the vision and the end goal will be, the main gap we're trying to fill there is how do we do it? What's the timeline that we think is reasonable? What's the timeline that the community thinks is acceptable? What's the prioritization methodology we should use into those decisions, whether it's dollars, staff time, or street space is another one, the right-of-way space, how that should be prioritized. And then as we look up and look at modal interactions and how we discuss those. A lot of times when it comes to these visions, a lot of it says, all the modes will work together fantastically, and that's kind of the vision, but we need to talk about the realistic, how that will work and how we're going to figure that out. So again, this is, when it's a gap filler, to me it seems like a pretty big gap, and that's kind of why a brief overview is only, I think, the way to kind of do this appropriately, because there's so much that's there, and we do want to hear from the consultants, but also this board and other folks as we go through this process and how we fill those gaps. But that is kind of the gap that I would say is identified specifically through community master plan, but it is echoed, at least in my opinion, even if you go down to local area specific plans and look at our regional stuff that we see coming out of Grand Valley Metro Council as well as our city's strategic plan. And so the other part of it is that this is not just a mobile GR effort, this is a city-wide effort, so there's other departments that are involved, so they're really helpful, but it's also an external stakeholder involved process. So when we do this, I think it's important to identify what's within our control, especially with infrastructure, and then what's within our partners' control, like our partners at the Rapid, and how we can work together with them. So another thing we're being really intentional about here is just being very, I think, intentional about identifying the priorities that our community is setting and then how we can achieve those goals. And if it's something that is like we have to work with the Rapid on, being clear about that and being clear with community, this is what we can do to help with them, but we need to rely on them to fill some gaps as well. And not just the Rapid, but anyone else who is a regional partner that, like for MDOT or neighboring cities or communities as well. So it's a very group effort, and I think identifying and making sure everyone kind of understands what is they're accountable for and what they're determining in terms of that prioritization is really important, and I think it'll really help us achieve the goals that have been set by these strategic plans.
Yeah, thanks. So I assume that like the work with a consultant will be like to, I guess, develop this methodology and analysis that you're talking about, or do you already have like some sort of idea of what you'd like to, like how you would like to frame things?
Yeah. So Max and I are our little sidebar. Max is, I'm a planner by trade, so some of these are a little bit more technical. So for your technical question, there are some typical ways of doing this type of modeling and analysis, and the one that is leading the industry right now is a multiple stacked model where they instead of taking each individual mode in your transportation system and making a plan here, here, and here, you do each analysis and then you stack them and see how they work together. That's the best way I can explain it, but I wanted to start with that, and that's something that we're looking for. And when we wrote the RFP, it really talks through this is what we're looking for. And also the other model we're an analysis we're looking for is looking for demographic information that is focusing on transportation equity. And there's quite a few tools out there that have been developed by your big GIS giants like ArcGIS and Esri and things like that. So looking at those different tools will be helpful. And then, some of you have your own ideas and suggestions too, and we'll be happy to take those kind of ideas. Do you want to add anything to the model staff?
I think in general, when we're talking about, major reform and major, process improvement or this change, as many points of view and help that we can get for that, the better. So to me, it just feels like the ability to talk to people who have done this work in other communities and mixing that with people who have done work in this community specifically, as well as all this very thorough community feedback we've gotten, it's just the best way to try to achieve something that is admittedly, I think, a difficult thing. I think it's totally within the realm of possibility, and I'm really confident and excited for this, but I do think it's a difficult challenge, and whenever we face difficult challenges, especially with community reform like this that's been laid out with our community master plan, the more folks we can get involved with that, the better. So I may not understand the technical side of it exactly, but I do think it's really interesting to mix ideas of folks from all over the country, all over the world, with the local expertise that we have here.
Thanks. I have questions. Wondering then too, you specify that, you'll look for projects that are grant ready and identify those sources of funding. But of course, the funding we have at a city level and a state level, that's not constant, right? It can change, especially at the state level, we're seeing there is increase in road funding. So I'm wondering if part of this could be thinking about an implementation strategy based on different funding scenarios. Let's hope not, but if we pull back funding from roads and stuff, what do we do in that case? What if, the city and the state decides we're going to invest a ton more money in doing all of this?
So that is actually spot on what we're looking for from this. I think there's a few elements to that. One is we are often reactive at the city to grants. So we'll see a grant, we'll be like, okay, let's go apply to this. This is about being not just proactive, but being ready for any sort of situation that arises so that we can be prepared to show this is our long-term plan, this is our prioritization method, this is how this would impact your grant and how we have a long-term, plan for figuring this out and how it would interact with us, as opposed to we're just reacting to this grant's existence and we're kind of coming up with something. But yeah, it addresses that point where we need to be ready for any sort of grant environment as well as any grant that can come, and if we are prepared and ready to present on that, it allows us to, I think, access more grant funds because we're prepared and ready to approach it no matter what comes up. So we are less reactive and more proactive in that sense.
And the other point to your question you bring up, when you do a plan like this that has a capital implementation phasing plan at the end, you typically do something called fiscal constraint. And this is very common in metropolitan planning organizations. They require, their long-range plan is required to be fiscally constrained. In other words, whatever your financial resources are that are coming in, and you typically use historical numbers, and then you look at some estimates about some things that'll come through. A little bit tough to do that right now with federal sources, but we do have some local sources that we can think through, and our state sources are pretty steady, if not growing, like you're pointing out with the neighborhood road funding. It's just become available. So we'll look at historical funding information that typically comes to this municipality. We'll look at what we're estimating future funds are in both local, state, and federal, and then we'll use that to map out a fiscal constraint. In other words, this is a pretty good estimate of what we can imagine will come the city's way, or we'll bring in from our own revenues to be able to spend on your transportation system. And what does that look like? And let's say I'm going to make up a number, that's $50 million a year. Here are the projects that you can do that are within that constraint of $50 million a year. So in other words, you're building a little budget, right, of what you expect your revenues are going to be, how much you can spend, and then as the smaller the number is annually, the longer it takes to build out whatever your long list of transportation improvements look like. Is that clear? If anybody wants to say that in a less nerdy way, I'm happy to hear you.
No, I get it. I'm more wondering like if this fiscal constraint can be like flexible. Like we could have like a low, medium, high constraint. So
For
we
sure.
can like
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's why the prioritization method is so important, because then we're saying, okay, this is the top priority, this is what we're putting our for sure funds towards, and then as things come up, we can say and communicate to grant partners, this helps us complete our network, this helps us complete this prioritization method, this is where it lies on there, and then we can be just more prepared to make sure that we're executing in the most responsible way, so.
I love this question because it gets back to the pragmatic side of a plan like this is one, we want to tie it to funding. We want to have some flexibility, whether that's high, medium, low, or how you want to look at that. And one of the ways I've done this in the past is actually putting aside for that kind of, I call it the happiest of scenarios, right? All the money's coming in, we've got an extra 20% on top of what we expect, and this is what we would spend that kind of windfall on, right? And you start putting in the things that are more of the nice to haves. You know, you start with your we must do. This is your next year, and then those really nice to haves at the end when you have those extra things. I really do think we're in a very healthy place from a state and local transportation funding point of view, and I am certainly not an economist, but West Michigan in general is in a relatively healthy economic state compared to most of our friends and neighbors around the country, and even our friends in other parts of Michigan. So we're looking at some predictability here, and I expect that that is going to be very helpful as we come up with this financial plan at the end.
Before we go to Commissioner Armbruster, I've got two things. One, I recognize you're a new face, and I should have asked this sooner. So before you give your comments, ask your question, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure.
And then after your comments, I've got just a couple of questions I'd like to ask, kind of speed round for this group to hopefully put a finer point on some of the questions. So,
Great.
please.
Well, thanks. Yes, this is my first meeting, so it's going to take me a little bit to get up to speed to learn everything that's happening. But my name is Rick Armbruster. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Upcycle Bikes. We provide bikes at no charge to individuals that need access to affordable transportation in and around Grand Rapids. So maybe a question and a comment, since I'm still learning. Most of the questions and comments thus far have been about the process here. Do you want perspectives or input about what's needed in the community? Okay. All right, then I'll go off on that. So you mentioned as part of the vision for the master plan to focus on equity. And I assume when you talk about equity, you mean providing transportation options to individuals across the full economic spectrum. I mean, I guess that's kind of how I think about it, internalize it. So if that's the case, I would encourage that. And so a couple of things. So we, as Upcycle Bikes, we distribute our bikes through partner organizations around the community. We have almost 60 partners that we distribute bikes to. What we hear from all of these folks is that transportation is a key social determinant of health, and it is the number one, or in some cases number two, challenge that all these individuals are facing. How do you get from point A to B to find a job, to get access to sports services, healthcare, all this stuff, right? And so, as we go through this process, what are the as you talked about, yes, layering these on top of each other, what are the options for people across the economic spectrum, and how can we deal with that? And one thing that I just read maybe last week is that the Chamber of Commerce has an initiative right now to, I think the article said, to eliminate homelessness in downtown Grand Rapids, and they were doing this in conjunction with, I know, Mel Trotter and Flywheel, I think, were involved in doing some studies there. But there was a number that there's 1,200 some odd homeless individuals in Grand Rapids. I don't know where that number came from, but there's a number out there. So how do we address transportation options for folks like that, that are experiencing housing instability or are new to the community as refugees, or, maybe can't speak the language to read the bus the bus schedule and stuff like that. So I guess, this is my soapbox, just to encourage that we are really focused on that complete picture of the entire population that exists in and around the city of Grand Rapids. And then I'll just add one other thing, like infrastructure that goes along with that, right? It's fine, like in our case, it's fine to get somebody a bike, but wouldn't it be really cool if we had parking garages for bikes, like in and around the city? So.
Thanks. I want to speak to real quick, you were real on the nose with social determinants of health. So social determinants of health is one of the key ways that a transportation plan to layer in social determinants of health in a plan. That is one of the best ways that you can look at transportation equity. So I wanted to just let you all know that I literally used that phrase in the proposal. So my expectation is that proposal teams come forward and are speaking to that in that language because it's so crucial to being able to kind of solve that ever-changing problem.
Okay.
And then you want to speak to anything else?
No, I just really appreciate your comments, and yeah, I think, obviously, equity is a core city value, so it's something we use as a lens for all of our work, and it's a broad word. It can mean a lot of things, but specifically with transportation, I think access to the ability to travel to and from locations is such an impact on all equity elements. So I think I'll just say whenever we approach this, we think about that, and even if you talk specifically about equity amongst modes, that's a huge part of the conversation. Is there an inequity in the modes of travel and how we support them in our transportation network? So even if we take people out of it and just talk about how the vehicles and the devices that we use to interact with our network and how they're prioritized. So I just want to echo what Jess said and just what you said and just say that is really important to us.
I don't care. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I've got just a couple of questions. My first one, like I said, a little bit of lightning round. I know that Commissioner Miguel Cipriano said that, I'm sorry, and I want to make sure, we were going to do a thing where we had everyone's...
Can I just quickly say something?
Yeah.
I should have said this beforehand. We like up to 2 or so.
Up to 2.
Yeah, up to 2.
All right.
So
we have
2, I guess, hopefully.
One interested committee member, anyone else? Commissioner Palpa, Commissioner Sessa. We're at 3 now. And this would be to be on the decision. Commissioner Rohr, we're at 4. Do we need to battle it out?
So I'm going to give you all a little bit of information about the time commitment here. So depending on how many proposals that we get, you will probably spend between, I would say, 2 to 5 hours per proposal. Okay. This is a very cool project, so I anticipate that we will have quite a few. Not like 20, but like 8 or 10. So just letting you know, it is a time commitment, but I'm really excited you're all interested. So back to you.
Actually, let me clarify. Up to 2 people on it or up to 2 proposals?
Up to 2 people from the Mobile GR
Yes.
Commission.
Okay.
I'm looking to 1 to 2 volunteers to add to that.
Our purchasing office has general limitations. We have other partners from the city and from our own department, of course, that are involved, so we can't have, that they would have to review each person's review. So just within, the process, that's what
Gotcha.
we're allocating for the Mobile GR Commission is 2 representatives.
So maybe...
Say up to 2, that's also silly. So let's just say 2.
Yeah, you're right at this point. So yeah, consider the time commitment, and if you still could commit to it right now, of course, we have 4 individuals, so we can, do you need those commitments now, or can we follow up?
Oh, no, we can follow up, that we have some time. What we're looking at is, we anticipate that proposals will arrive to us on the 27th, and so we'll shortlist within probably the next 8 to 10 business days after that would be my preference. But if we need a little more time, that's okay. That, I think, puts us at our next, we can make a decision at our next Mobile GR Commission. Will that put us too far off schedule?
It'll be close for interviews. Yeah, so we'll have to vote.
So we may need to have you all make a decision before That next.
And I will just
meeting-
say, there is, so before the proposals come in, whoever of the two that aren't selected, please meet with the other folks. Don't break quorum rules, so you can't meet too many, but meet with the other folks and just give your insight on it. But also, the mobile GR, so I mentioned communications with community and stakeholders. You are obviously a key, if not the most key, but definitely one of the top key stakeholders that will be engaging throughout this process. So just because you're not directly representative on this does not mean that you will not have heavy insight and input on this process.
And then my other lightning round, and I know we have another discussion topic that I believe it'll be another robust conversation. Commissioner Aurora had one other comment in response to Commissioner Armbruster as well. But I do want to ask, one of the things is priorities, and for those who maybe didn't want to ask a lot of questions, do you have any quick priorities that you would like to share for this, to kind of hopefully wrap this up as well? Any other priorities maybe you haven't shared or would like to share?
Addressing load imbalance.
Commissioner Whalen, did I see?
Yeah, just the relationship between land use and transit go hand in hand. So they're just thinking about like future upzoning, what density in the future is aspirational. And then I think a lot of times what's nice to have can be held captive by what we're currently doing. So just considering like what are we going to stop doing in order to make these new things happen. And then finally, throughput at the expense of place, and just to reiterate how important it is with like the local ASPs and the way that we're embodying those places to become what they want to be in the future, and how this we don't sacrifice the connections of the nodes at the expense of the nodes themselves.
Maybe we should be immobile and mobile GR.
Workshop that later.
Yeah.
I personally like the idea of experience, right? Having worked with other successful, maybe, I don't know how much you can put that in an RFP, but have you worked successfully with other cities, and you know, maybe of similar sizes too? Okay. We'll wrap up with Commissioner Aurora. I know you had one comment, and we'll move on to the next one.
Actually, I'll follow directly on that. I mean, being that, I'll get on my soapbox, which is bicycles and mobility via bicycle, you know, over other modes of transportation. But it only happens if you have equity and access, which means, you know, a lot of the streets in the city, like I'll ride on them, but I know a lot of people that won't. And I think that's it's really our Achilles heel right now. I think that we have really a potential for people to ride their bicycles year round in this city. This winter was obviously strange because it actually snowed and stayed on the ground for 2 months, which is weird here. But, you know, you think about other cities and other examples. Minneapolis is a great example of a city that has a climate actually probably worse than ours in terms of winter weather, and people cycle year round in Minneapolis. But it's because they have the infrastructure to do it, which means somewhere along the way they addressed that as being a gap. And I guess, you know, I'll add to, you know, other commissioners' comments on priorities. I think that one of the things we've got to look at is not just broadly say, let's close gaps. I think we really need to say to the RFP, or in that RFP, what we send out, we've got to say, hey, these are the things that we've assessed are problems we have. We don't think our mass transit system, buses, the rapid, we don't think it actually addresses the real need because it doesn't go the places we need it to go. Maybe it goes half the places we need to go, or 70% of the places. How do we effectively get it to go to all the places or more places that we need it to go? How do we make that interact with cycling? You know, people will ride a bicycle to one location, but then want to put it on a bus. Not every bus you can put a bicycle on, which if that route doesn't have a bus capable of taking a bicycle, you don't have that option to do a multimodal trip there. So I think if we give some really clear priorities in the RFP of what we want covered, what gaps we want covered, that one will solve some of those problems, but then leave it open-ended enough that as the professionals that we've hired to actually eventually do this work, or that we're considering to do this work, they look at it and go, hey, you didn't consider this thing, but this other thing, if you add it in, layered on top of, you know, using your layering example, which I think is great. You know, you go into an ArcGIS map, you start peeling layers back. It's a really great way to see where you have gaps and where you have other things where one layer covers another, where there's a gap. It's the same, I think it's the same thing with a transportation network. So I think we just need to be we need to be focused enough that we don't just get really wild ideas. And then I think the budgetary constraints become less of a problem because we've already thought about what gaps we need covered in relationship to the budgetary constraints that we will collectively understand exist, even if we don't advertise them right up front. So.
One other comment you made me think of. I assume that this process and these consultants will help address or quantify the economic impact of different modes of transportation on our city and our region. And I guess what I mean by that is a lot of businesses, I heard it again last week from a couple downtown, say that we need parking in front of our building or next to our building, right, in order to have a successful business. But there are studies out there, and I can't quote them, but there are studies out there that show if you are able to walk up to a business or ride a bike to a business or whatever, the economic impact is even larger than having accessible parking right in front of your building. And so I don't know the answer to all that stuff. I'm not smart enough for that, but hopefully these consultants in this process can help address the economic impact that then can be used as justification for whatever the end result is. Does that make sense?
Sure. I do want to clarify that the RFP is already out there. So appreciate y'all's
Right, but as you
thoughts
go
about
through,
that. Right, so, so that's kind of set, but where I appreciate this, and I just want to let y'all know the process here. All of this input is helpful when we go to negotiate scope and have a final contract together, so scope of work. So thank you for explaining that. I just wanted to, I'd heard a couple of things, hey, put this in the RFP, and I was like, that's already done, so.
It is, but I think both of your comments are absolutely addressed in the RFP. I mean, we specifically talked about ways that our transportation or our transit network interacts with our other modes of travel and how we could do that. Obviously, again, that is ultimately the rapid scope, so we are not directly involved in terms of like making major decisions, but we work with them tightly, and that's obviously a huge layer to our transportation network. So it's absolutely part of it and addressing it. And then the economic development side of transportation is another huge part of it. And this is where I think, again, when I look at this, the major gap that's missing is this discussion of how we implement things. And when we say we want this balanced mobility and the master plan, it doesn't say, well, what do you do in residence? What do you do in business districts? What do you do downtown? What do you do on, in Creston or in Boston Square? Like, these are very different locations to have this overarching vision, and that's why area-specific plans are really helpful to go in and look and kind of connecting those two. So, but I do think the point you brought up is addressed in the RFP, and to Jessica's point, I think it's something we could talk about in scope because it's very important to talk to folks. Obviously, safety and access are very important as well, but not equally, but we're trying to figure out the how all of these involve each other, and the economic side of it is a large part, large element.
We're running out of time. Okay. I do want to make sure we have time for the transportation demand management. So I do want to kind of move that discussion. Please keep in mind, feel free to engage by email as well if you have other comments you're thinking of. Or commissioner comments will be written. So,
thank you. So yes, moving to our transportation demand management program update. So Trey Reinhardt, transportation planner, has done a wonderful job of putting together this memo. This is another item that we would love to have as mostly a discussion. So I'm not going to go through all of these elements in high detail, but if there are questions and that is the desire of the commission, we'll absolutely do that. And that's why I have Trey here to help talk through this, as he is the lead of our TDM programmatic efforts. So overall, we obviously have communication campaigns. We've been doing this for years through some of my previous work, and we have new folks on the team that are really helping with this. We have added additional prioritization internally of making sure this is a priority for us moving into 2026. And that starts with things like the changes to our downtown transportation network with additions of event venues like the amphitheater, and talking about how important transportation demand management is in that element, but it's across the city. When it talks to engagement and communications with folks about the options available to them, what would make multimodal options more appealing, how we can incentivize that. So I think communication campaigns are crucial in engaging engagement campaigns are crucial to these efforts. We have regional partnerships, specifically with the GVMC, the folks at Grand Valley Metro Council. They are doing TDM work currently. I want to be very intentional here that we are not duplicating too many efforts. There's a lot of really great work being done over there. I know at least Ken is working with them on this board, and hopefully others interact with them as well. But we want to be very clear that we are working with those partners and their efforts extensively, and we really appreciate them and everything they've done for the region, and they continue to do for the city of Grand Rapids. We have our shared mobility programs. So this is, we're highlighting specifically the DART car share program, which has been highly utilized and has, I think, been a national success if we compare it to national car share programs across the country in terms of the level of subsidization as well as the level of utilization. And then generally infrastructure improvements. Our traffic safety folks do a wonderful job with the resources they have, but also just doing something that is an extremely sensitive and difficult challenge of helping to improve safety throughout our neighborhood traffic calming program and throughout our city in terms of addressing infrastructure improvements for that. And then, so that's a little bit of current existing conditions assessment, if we look at it through the mobility blueprint lens, for what we're doing now. But we're also exploring future transportation demand management policy, as well as programmatic efforts. And this is something that Trey has really been working on, really with a whole team that Trey has been leading. And this is working with our friends at planning. Commissioner Weiler mentioned land use, working with them to talk about the new zoning ordinance integration and how transportation and transportation demand management specifically can interact with that zoning ordinance updates, as well as discussions and exploration of transportation demand management ordinance that would be separate of that zoning ordinance. We've explored with many different communities across the country how they've enacted this and used it, and we've talked with our planning staff as well as a few partners throughout the city on how this could work, and Trey has done a lot of research and study on this as well. So again, we like these to be more discussion-based, so I don't want to keep talking, but that's kind of the high-level summary of our efforts and what we are working on for now and in the future around TDM. So the main questions we have are there any TDM program areas or strategies that the Commission would like staff to prioritize or explore further? What role should the Mobile GR Commission play as we explore this TDM ordinance and its development? And are there community concerns or equity considerations staff should weigh as TDM policies are developed? So a little bit of similar stuff with mobility blueprint, but again, more specifically around programmatic efforts and ordinance language, as opposed to on a higher level with the strategy in the mobility blueprint.
And I will add that last meeting, we did vote to have a TDM specific work group, so that is in the process as well.
Yes, and so an element of that I would like to discuss here is because we have a TDM work group that we are part of at the GVMC level. I know there was a question there, and so I'm just posing a discussion to include external partners. I do wonder if external partners might say, we're already doing stuff at the GVMC tier, so maybe it is something more where, and I think Ken was on the TDM here, so maybe it's something where Ken, you can help bridge those two gaps, where we have the one here where you can meet with our staff to talk about it. It's a Mobile GR Commission specific subgroup. So I just want to address that as a potential concern for duplication.
I also sit down and I'm happy to give updates after meetings. We have one on the 23rd, I could give an update.
Our concern was reaching out to too many partners who are already on the GVMC one and then saying, here's another board that we have to be on, when we can, I think, help bridge those gaps for external partners. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's an important clarification, I think, to make. So, okay. So I think the three questions still stand. I imagine we all have thoughts, but feel free if you need to take a moment to read. Commissioner Cipriano.
Yeah, can you list out the program areas or strategies for TDM? Could you list out the program areas or strategies in that first bullet? Are there TDM programs or strategies? I was wondering if you list them out anywhere where we can select from.
So current ones, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, almost everything we do is related to TDM, so it's hard to just say like these are them, but certainly our neighborhood traffic calming program and our general infrastructure programming efforts for safety infrastructure, because I think safety is a huge element of TDM. If folks don't feel safe engaging in other modes, then they are most likely to use them. So the overall safety elements, and then we look at access and equity programs. Like we have a current shared micromobility program that offers 50% discount for those who are on subsidy programs and other things, so equity programs like that. Our car share program is heavily subsidized from the user's perspective, so that's another mobility program that I think incentivizes TDM efforts and allows folks to maybe not own a car and focus on this sort of idea of multimodal use as opposed to single occupant usage. Our Dash circulator service is something that we're hoping helps support transit by connecting, the sort of spider, it's probably not the technical term, the spider network that the Rapid currently has, and doing connections across the river and in other ways there. Our micromobility program in general, so outside of just the equity, I think our shared micromobility program allows for access to many of the communities that we're there. Our communications and engagement efforts are another crucial part of this. We met on Monday with Oakdale neighbors. We meet frequently with community to talk about how we can help incentivize multimodal use of different modes in their communities. So that education campaign component is a large part of it. Anything else you want to add?
I think I would just jump in there and say, as I'm thinking about this and just cycling through all the different kind of things I've seen like this come through the last 10 years, try to go upstream. I think there might be a lot of value in investing more in communications and engagement. I think in this room, you gave a presentation maybe a year or so ago about your work in doing that and in engaging folks, because I think with all the knowledge that we have, all the knowledge we might hire from outside, the knowledge is there, we know what to do, and so then why are we still dragging behind, whether it's the city, the state, this country, why are we saying? I think it's with the buy-in, and so we might get a lot of bang for our buck by investing in focusing more on communications and engagement, because if we know what we're supposed to do, we're not getting the buy-in, that's what we need to do then. Then we have the money, then we don't have to cut the dash, or we don't have to think about how we're, trying to put this twin-size sheet on this queen-size bed. We're like, we got all the money, we can hire all the people we need to do. We don't need to hire any consultants. So I'd be curious to see how much more effective we can be if we focus more on communications and engagement.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and that's really helpful feedback as we have asked this question. It's a great answer for it and helpful for us. I will also say I think it was November, I can't remember exactly when we did a workshop here, communications and engagement was a priority, and we have intentionally scaled up our communications and engagement efforts. So as you remember when I did the presentation before, I was a team of one. And now we have multiple people who are involved in that effort at Mobile GR specifically, but also working directly with our friends at the Office of Communications. So I don't think those efforts have quite come to fruition from like the impact standpoint, but they're really starting right now, and we're going out to community much more often. We're being more proactive, but we can continue to scale that up. So I appreciate your feedback, and I think that's that's helpful for our prioritization conversations.
I didn't see Commissioner Sessa.
Yeah, so, in terms of the regional partnerships, I think the big one is obviously the Rapid always. I know it's tricky, obviously, because the Rapid is a separate entity. It covers the region, not just the city of Grand Rapids. But, it is a huge, huge part of how people move around the city and in the region. And, I don't see how we can, have these discussions without, including, how we think of our public transportation network is feeding into all of this. So just wanted to flag that. But then in terms of, I guess, the strategies that you were just mentioning, I think if we think about incentives for how we can encourage other behavior, obviously the upcycle bikes is a great resource, but I think as hopefully we get biking, that it becomes more popular in the city with safer infrastructure that we put in place. I think e-bikes is a fantastic way for people who are maybe less on the hardcore biking scale to get into it. And I've seen other cities, other states who have e-bike like incentive, purchase incentive type programs like that, where you can get like a discount on the purchase of an e-bike. And I think that would be something like that if the city were to implement, could be very impactful.
I just want to clarify, the regional partnership, we weren't like excluding the Rapid, we do work with them. It was just highlighting that we are working with GVMC on our GDM plan, and the Rapid is part of that board and stuff like that. Yeah.
Mayor Graham, I see Commissioner Rohrer, and then I'm going to add myself to, I've got a couple comments. Oh, and don't let me miss you this time. All right, Commissioner Whistling, and then I can go after you if you'd like.
So I want to throw a bunch of things out there. You know, I promised myself I would talk less of these things so that I would have lower risk of an M-Live article about me. Mayor LeGrand thinks we should clone dinosaurs and have them, you know, drive our buses or whatever. That'll be a headline, right?
Listen, I just want to say about that, I have never, ever been a part of being in the tabloids, and this is amazing. We made it to the U.S. Sun, if you guys didn't know, and it was amazing. So thank you, I appreciate it. It's really, I've told all my friends.
Yeah.
It's a great time.
So, you know, one of the headlines, my favorite headlines of the last year or so was the Onion article headline that said that, you know, surveys show that there's overwhelming support of public transit for other people. You know, I think the Rapid polling actually kind of shows that too, like the support for public transportation is for like people other than me getting to medical appointments and people other than me doing stuff, but I don't want to write it. And so I want to point out, like, we've got one of the things that we have to think about is like, how do we, I think Ken's point is exactly right. Like the marketing is important, but I think marketing, not just like, hey, this would be great, but I think maybe our most promising horizons are talking about cost, right? Like how much money you can save if you become and my current lead candidate is the vision of being a 1.5 car family, not of being a 1 car family, because that's it. And Andy, I respectfully, I think Minneapolis has got a better shake than us because they have less snow. It's not a temperature thing; it's a how much snowfall thing you have. Like the only place that's more challenging than Grand Rapids to bike in is maybe Buffalo. Like every time you get snow, it just makes things hard. Now, what I do is, and at the city level, we have these, you know, bullet points about mobility, and one of them was about, you know, different forms of transportation, and my sort of witty edit was, and also 5 million-year-old forms of transportation. I sometimes worry that we don't spend enough time really getting granular about how to make it really good to be a pedestrian, because that's a 5 million-year-old form of transportation that works really well in a lot of contexts, but we can make it work a lot better than it does now. And I personally switch from biking to walking in the winter, because I don't want to bike on frozen streets because I'm old and I don't want to fall off my bike. I don't care how well it's plowed. I just don't want to hit a patch of ice, but I can walk. And so, you know, I walk to this meeting. I think that I'm always a little worried that we under prioritize pedestrian access, partly because there's so much less stuff involved, right? We're not providing you a machine. We're not, all of those things that look like deliverables are invisible for pedestrians or for being pedestrians. So I just want to throw that out there. The other thing is I would love to, if we're looking at this, that we start thinking about non-car activity counts. So the only data I know around here is what I got at a Rapid meeting, which was some surveys on like, I think it was like 6% of people walk to work, 3% of people take the transit, and 3% of people bike, something like that. Well, if we could start looking at some of these corridors where we maybe are hoping that behaviors will change, I really hope we count before we do changes, and then we can compare it to what happens, because, you know, maybe we think something's going to work and it doesn't work. So this group may think there's a huge amount of pent-up demand for biking. Maybe there isn't. And, I think we have to be willing to look at where we are now. I mean, everybody counts cars. Realtors count cars. But I'm not sure that we've got great systems yet for counting bikes and pedestrians. And whether we do or not, I want to make sure that, I would love to make sure that we do. So, I don't know if I made any headlines there, but.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just actually want to follow up on my colleague's point about the e-bikes. So there is actually one city in the state that actually does an e-bike incentive program. There's only one, it's Lansing. Not even East Lansing, it's Lansing itself. If that's something we could look at, that is a way, I mean, as somebody who's the resident expert in the state on cycling, e-bikes are frankly the most easiest way to get somebody who is a non-cyclist right now to get on a bicycle, because it makes hills flat and it makes wind irrelevant. And it is two things that we have a lot of in Grand Rapids. I mean, I think it would help tremendously if we had a way to figure out, a equitable and fair way to do things like that. I think that would incentivize some changes in behavior. I respectfully agree with the mayor on the snow issue. It's something that only the most foolish of us will not prevent them from getting on a bicycle, I admit. On the other hand, there's a lot of the rest of the year where there isn't snow on the ground and where the roads are usable. And again, I'll go back to my earlier comments about the equity of safety. And it also applies to pedestrians. I mean, the reality is we have a lot of sidewalks that are in poor condition, but then more importantly, we don't have good crossings in a lot of places. So even if you want to walk somewhere, I'll use my own daughter who goes to CC. She walks to school, but she has to take an out of her way path to get to CC from our house, because otherwise she would have to cross Fulton Street where there is not a crosswalk. So she's got to take a pretty significant detour, significant for her. She's 19. She thinks that if she has to walk an extra 300 feet, it's massively inconvenient. The point is we, these are just like things that we could look at with the transportation demand, and that's what I'll leave you with is the old adage about bridges. Humans didn't put bridges where people were crossing the river. They put bridges where it made sense to put the river, right? Or where it made sense. If you come up to one point of the shore and you got to get to the other point, that might not be a good place to go across the river if there's not a bridge, because either the water's moving too fast, it's too deep, whatever. So you go downstream to a place where it makes sense. But it doesn't actually make sense to put the bridge in that place, because it's more convenient if you put it in the place where it's really needed. And I think that part of looking at, as we use transportation demand as a way to drive changes that we'll make in the network, it really ought to be changes that make common sense, just based upon if you look at the flow and you look at the movement of how people are using those non-vehicular modes of transportation. Oh, and let me leave with this other thing. You pointed out the spider network, or a hub and spoke network of the buses. As far as I can tell, that's probably one thing, if we could somehow get Rapid to start using some, and I know this has been talked about for years and years and years in the city, but if they could start connecting the ends of the spokes, or even halfway down the spokes, people would use the buses more often. Because if you're near the end of a spoke, you have to come back all the way to downtown to get on another bus to go to the other place. Your bus ride just took 40 minutes when it should have only taken 10. And I understand Rapid is, they've got budgetary constraints, but can we pressure them to start looking at some of these cross-spoke routes that they've never built?
So speaking from the Rapid perspective, I really appreciate the comments about how Rapid does integrate fully into this, and welcome the discussion to move forward. A couple things specific. One is, I think this was brought up before too, but first mile, last mile is always a big challenge. And in some parts, there's just buses shouldn't be going to some areas too, but how do we bridge that connection? But also equip people so that bus riding is not that scary. It's always a challenge, I know, and trying to get first-time riders can be difficult. Just quickly on the hub and spoke, I think the crosstown connections is definitely the way to go, but you need high frequencies and high density, and unfortunately the funding's not there. So we'd love to move in that direction, and it's just a matter of trying to get the resource to get there. So all these things will be brought up as we move through these discussions, I'm sure.
I will, kind of on TDM, I want to mention, even just from my point of view, one is I think there's an element for me, father of a almost 5-year-old and a 3-month-old, where I drive more than I want to, right? Like, I think there's a reality to, and one could look at it like, hey, that's a lack of innovation on your part, and you might be right, or imagination. But what I like about TDM is that I think it creates an opportunity to help me to sort through the noise, maybe save some bandwidth, and have something that's helpful to me to see, hey, this is a way you could consider maybe not using your car. I also think there's this element of, there's a certain level of risk that I'm willing to put myself in, you know, riding on the road in a bike, right? I think there is some risk there. I don't know how much, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put my kid in that situation, right? When I look at this, and specifically TDM, I like the idea of, hey, you know what? Let's overlay. I'm thinking of Commissioner Aurora's 70% idea. Like you're getting 70% to your destination. Well, how can you mix and match to be able to get 100% to your destination? And what is there that can help me figure that out? And so then I'd also think that I would put a lot of priority on what does it look like to have ordinances. I think when I see ordinance, I think of sustainability for something. And so I would really like to see some sustainability around TDM, because I think that this could be really helpful for the overall marketing, which I agree with Commissioner Miguel Cipriano. We need to market and market well. We need people to understand that options exist, because if they don't know that, then they're not going to use those options. And then I think that the ordinance could also have an element of, hey, we need to evaluate this. We need to be counting the various modes of transportation for this. So really appreciate inclusion of that, and wanted to put that as a couple priorities for me.
Sorry, I had a few more comments that people reminded me to think about. So thank you everyone for saying things. So one thing I think that hasn't been mentioned is I think traffic planning, specifically downtown. Like we do have all these new event venues coming up, and our existing ones, right? And you know, obviously traffic is always a big thing that people talk about when they're like, oh, I have to go downtown, deal with traffic. And obviously there's different traffic patterns too, especially like around the arena. That is one I know of. And so I'm wondering if there's an opportunity maybe to work with like the police department, who is like managing this, but also just at the city level, thinking about how can we like manage those traffic patterns in a way that prioritize the more sustainable, less single car uses, right? Because, you know, currently if you want to go to the arena, the bus, like a lot of the buses have to go off their normal route because, you know, certain streets are closed, certain things are blocked off. But that kind of then can create its like own anxiety if you're like riding the bus for the first time and you're like, wait, it's not going to the stop that I thought it was going to. Like, what do I do now? And that can be like a turnoff. So I'm wondering if we can prioritize, like in terms of like the downtown core around the venues, how can we prioritize transit access? How can we prioritize like bike access, pedestrian access, all these things to these venues, so that like, you know, those feel more attractive to people coming in than something like driving their car and parking in a parking garage. I also really like the idea of tying all of this to sustainability, because obviously, you know, transportation is, I think, like the number one or number two source of like emissions from the city. So, you know, that this is like a huge, I think, untapped potential of, you know, exploring transportation choice as a sustainability measure. So that could be an interesting thing to include in the communications. And then, yeah, just in terms of the infrastructure, I think a common thing that people like say a lot is like, is this safe enough that like you would allow your kids to use it, right? Exactly that point. And so I think if we can like, from a safety perspective, from like an implementation standpoint, like really focus on, you know, how that equity of safety, I think, was a really good way to put it. Like everyone is on the same level, not just the people that are traveling around in their tin cans with airbags, right? But everyone. And so, you know, just thinking about ways that we can navigate a world in which cars are getting heavier, cars are getting taller, bigger. This is all well known to be worse for the people outside the car if you happen to get in a crash in any of these situations. So, how can we think about these things with regard to like the current like vehicles and the safety around them?
Thank you. So I just, again, as I said earlier, because there's 3 parts, please let me know if we forgot. We're going to try to do them off memory. So the first one that you mentioned, I think, and as someone who has been engaging on this topic for 9 years now, and I say that a lot because I just want to say, like, this is something that is so important and passionate to me, but I've had these conversations so often. The one thing that is the most common theme, and I think this is reflected across the country, is more important than, and this doesn't seem logical, but I think it's important to call it, more important than price, more important than safety to folks when they're deciding what mode to use is convenience. And it is not even close. And when we talk about our changing downtown circulation and those things, I think convenience will be a huge factor when it comes to TDM in the downtown area. If I think about going to, I'm a big Detroit Lions fan, if I think about going to a Detroit Lions game, driving to the front of the arena is not convenient by any means. It may not also be affordable either, but it is not convenient. What is convenient is using Detroit's transportation system. If I go to Chicago, I don't even use my car at all. I use the train, not because it's more affordable, but because it is way more convenient to me than anything there. So that's just an anecdotal, my experience, but when I talk with community, it's similar. When I'll sit down and they're like, I know the sustainability part, but I'm running late, I have kids, it's time. There's so many things that go into it, and it ultimately comes down to, for more people than not, there certainly are safety and financial elements to it as well, but I do think convenience is huge, and I'm interested to see, and a big part of our efforts around the event venues this summer are focused on saying the most convenient way, we strongly believe the most convenient way to get to these event arenas is not driving to the front of the door. There's a lot of reasons for that, but generally we're using that as our communication efforts, and we're saying you need to use other modes. You need to walk, you need to use the bus, you need to use micromobility to make it more convenient for you. We do talk with the police about this, and we've explored options. There are some technical aspects to doing things like, so obviously their priority is safety. And doing things like bike or bus only lanes is very difficult from their management standpoint because people will often either go around the bus or sneak in from the back. So they have a real big concern about the way people behave when they do restricted access at those sort of intersections. However, we are exploring with them to find ways to do it. And I do think we've worked with the Partners of the Rapid. I do think, and we're not finally there, I think we have a very convenient option for folks who are taking transit to get, again, probably the most convenient way to get to the arena as opposed to folks who are driving cars. So the second part is about sustainability. I think sustainability is a really important part when it comes to communications. However, again, as someone who's talked about this a lot, it often distracts from the conversation. And that's frustrating. I wish it didn't, but it's just the reality is it often turns into a conversation about the folks' understanding of how sustainability concerns exist in this world. And to me, it often derails what I think is a conversation about something that impacts everyone. And while sustainability, I believe, impacts everyone, I think there is some arguments on other sides that maybe that doesn't. So anyway, we use it, and we use it strategically, but overall we do try to focus primarily on an economic safety and that kind of convenient aspect for it. And then, I told you I forget, I don't remember the third one exactly, your points, but I think it was around the safety, more about the safety element. And I think that is, while I do mention the convenience is ultimately the deciding factor, it seems, safety is for sure, and the economic side of it are huge factors as well. So if we look at like folks, and we've done our surveys, but we look at national surveys as well, and we had our 10,000 person survey when we did this for our commuter efforts, and 90% said convenience is a top 3 priority, 70% said safety, 60% said economic. That's rough numbers, but generally it's there. So obviously these are still very important factors. And to the point of, could my kid ride on this? I mean, that's the reality about this, is that we have to So when I first came on board doing this role in 2020 for the communications aspect, I said, so I'm doing safety communications and TDM communications. Like, okay, and I kind of did that. And I remember I can't remember who it was, but someone in the department was basically like, there is no way you can do them separately. They're absolutely intertwined, and for very good reason. So I just will say, from a communications perspective, I really appreciate your comments, and I think it is one of those things where we really have to get as many people as we can involved in these conversations. And while I love social media, I think that's a great platform to use. I think we're learning more and more we need to have in-person conversations with folks and basically develop champions that we can have go out in the community and talk about their experience. We talk about getting on the bus for the first time. I mean, that's one where we've done vlogs and showed people experience, but the one way we've done it the most is by having folks say, hey, why don't you ride the bus with me this weekend? And they're like, well, I don't ride the bus with you. Like, doing that, I'm like, oh, it's actually totally different than I expected. So ways to explore that from a programmatic effort is something, again, we're being intentional about going into 2026 or in 2026 now.
Move on, and do we have everything we need? All right, so we're going to move on to, I'm sorry, thank you all for being a part of that, sharing your thoughts and opinions, and helping to shape this. To me, it's really exciting. Updates. We'll start with Commissioner Sessa as the Vital Streets Committee, Mobile GR representative.
Yeah, so the next Vital Streets meeting is April 21st, I believe, something like that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend because I'll be out of town, but yes, I will be sure to share the agenda and all that stuff.
Thank you. Glad that we have that as a standing agenda item too. All right, and then we have Mobile GR March 2026 updates.
All right, so you all have your updates in the package. I've definitely heard a couple of, kind of comments over the last year about this particular update in your packet. It just hasn't been a priority to reformat that at this time. I am really hopeful in the next, like I was telling y'all last week, last month. It sounds like it's just all blurring together. We're working on a couple of key leadership positions at Mobile GR and getting those recruited. So I'm just going to let you all know that although it is a priority, it's not the number one priority right now, but I have heard a lot of you in your feedback about what to do. The other thing about the updates that we'll be working towards is recently the city has updated their strategic plan, just like a little refresh. And so we'll need to update some of our metrics and in that update so that you all are following right along. Okay? They're not vastly different or anything. So just let you know, they're just a little bit more refined from our KPIs. On director's updates, and typically I would write these down, but I'll let you know the biggest announcement I have is that our longtime fiscal officer, Andrea Anderson, has resigned, and her last day is next Wednesday. I asked her if she wanted to come by and say hi to everybody, and she said absolutely not. Andrea she's our lover of spreadsheets. She's the one that keeps the parking fund in the black. We're really, really sorry to see her go. She's been with Mobile GR for 9 years. She did start Mobile GR before Max. Yeah, they had a
very competitive 2 weeks before.
Very competitive.
I'm very excited that she's leaving now, so I can be
the longest tenure. Yeah. So that puts us in the position of I typically have 6 people reporting to me on the core team at Mobile GR. Right now I have 2. That's your friend Max over here, and then Ariana Jeske, who you all know, who is the assistant director. So we are a little bit sad. We're a lot sad about Andrea and the other 2 recruitments that are in place, the IT manager and the parking mobility and operations manager. I have interviews scheduled for next week. We are almost done. We are partway through that recruitment process, and I'm excited that Chad, your chair, is going to come and be a community voice on those interview processes, so that'll be exciting. And when we do make selections and we finalize that process, I'll be sure to bring them by and introduce them to you all here. So we're doing great. We are thriving. It's going to be fine. It's just been a lot of changes at Mobile GR over the last 21 months when I started here in June 2024. So I appreciate you all's patience if I'm not getting back to you quite as quickly as you would like. Always copy Mary, and she will make sure that we get time on my calendar if any of you need me. So I appreciate that. And that's all I've got for right now, unless anyone has any specific questions about just something they want an update on. I have it brought to you.
Yeah, I had a question. I guess it was in like the monthly update. So I was looking through a lot of these, like specifically the like transportation network, like infrastructure projects. I was just seeing a lot of things that are like on hold or paused or like not happening. I'm just wondering if maybe we can like talk about why that is.
Yeah, I can tell you right now. So right now, we're in the middle of our budget season, and we are also in the middle of finalizing anything that was going to go to construction, right? So if anything is in construction or anything, this is the weird time of year where bids come in and we try to see what contractors have what availability here, so we're a little bit in flux. So if something is on hold or on pause, without just kind of diving deeper into specific details, that is typically what's going on this time of year. The other big thing is that mobility blueprint is really the guiding document that needs to be developed to really secure what our capital program, our capital stack looks like with a lot of predictability. And so that those are the two things that might be making things a little bit wonky or putting things on pause. So, but I think it's a really good question. Thank you for asking that.
Well, we're not going to like pause everything while we wait for the mobility blueprint.
No. Okay. we still have a program to deliver. And by we, I mean the city as a whole. Yeah. It's a capital program.
And I'll ask Jessica, did you combine your director's updates too?
I did. Sorry, I just moved right into that.
Okay, all right. So yeah, just, any other questions about the updates?
No, I just would like to keep an eye on the Dash and shared micromobility and EV car share as we continue in this ongoing war. I'm wondering how these numbers might spike in usership.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. I did ask Max if he'd give you all an update on where we're at in the Dash.
Yeah, so, and I think if you don't mind, I'm going to preempt some commission meetings to come in the next few months about similar things that you just mentioned, Commissioner Cipriano. So for the Dash specifically, we are engaging with community, and so I don't know if anyone's familiar with our community engagement framework. We have 3 levels of that. We are using the Inform engagement model. So when I use the word engagement, usually that means a more collaborative approach. This isn't Inform. We're telling folks that due to budget constraints, we are moving forward with a 1-year pilot of the Dash to keep at the same level of funding currently, and hopefully improving things like shorter trip time and higher frequency will help with that. However, this is a 1-year pilot. So anyway, we're going to be doing extensive engagement sessions starting next week with community to help inform them about them, but also to set a foundation of the co-collaboration element of our engagement framework, which is going to be, we would like to discuss what we're doing next year this time. And we're going to have this conversation about how we are best supporting transit in the community. So we took a lot of your feedback very seriously. And again, we at the city, we try our best to use the appropriate level of engagement with community. But due to the time constraints of when we have to let the Rapid know about this, the service change, as well as the budget constraints, before going into a budget proposal, we do have to inform folks about this change, and we want to make sure they're heard, and we're going to make sure that that is a very comprehensive effort. So our next steps are next week to start with, speaking with residents, neighborhood associations, our business community, and everyone involved. So we're looking forward to those conversations. But again, to let folks know that while this is an Inform for a one-year pilot, we are very much interested in getting their feedback on the future of the program, and this is not the end of that conversation. That's going to be a year-long conversation over the next year that we have with community to talk about it. And then, I'm sorry if I misunderstood the other two parts, but I believe, or the other part of your comment, but I just wanted to highlight our plan is for next month to really talk about the amphitheater and the launch in May, but also just the downtown kind of event traffic and that sort of that element. So we're going to come with a lot of details around that. And then very shortly after, we want to talk more about specifically our shared micromobility program and the future there with this commission. We think there are some major decisions and considerations that have been made, and obviously we want to speak with you about it. So those are upcoming in short time.
Two other things I see on your list. These are good. So I'll start with, I'm going to do this one. So the parking incentive program that you all had a working group about, and then we had a conversation together with the facilitators of that. And then following up, you all asked us to take a look at that from a TDM perspective. Trey took that on and took care of that. We have a little memo, something we're going to bring to you, but we wanted to bring that to you at a later date. Since that's not hot on the top of the list, we wanted to make sure that we had conversations around special event traffic in April. So we are looking to bring back that information to you all sometime at a future meeting. April's getting pretty stacked because we're also looking at the parking investment strategy. We had a little bit of a delay in that project schedule. It had kind of a delay in the middle anyway around our data collection. So I don't think I'm ready to come to you all in April. I may have to move that until May. But in April, we are focusing on the amphitheater, and I'll work with your chair about our future topics down the line. I really like to let y'all know what your topics are looking like for the rest of the year. And I want to sit down with your chair and your vice chair and just have that conversation, and then we'll bring that, I'll make that my promise to you is that I'll bring that to you in my director's updates next month. That we'll get a little bit more of a plan of all of the things that we're covering for the rest of the calendar year, and then looking into the future, because about this time next year, what we will be talking about is event traffic again, due to a second huge event venue being added in there. And we want to talk about those, and I keep saying special event and event traffic because we already have great events in downtown Grand Rapids, cultural events at the arena, Rosa Parks Circle, Abomnawa, how did I say? I'm saying it wrong. Anabawan, thank you, the park. I'm used to saying Athabascan Alaskan names, and I just rattle those off, but I'm working on some of our local folks' names here. So all of those are big cultural activities and city-sponsored public events. And to add to that, a 12,000 seat amphitheater right there with everything else, and then just across the river with multiple bridges and access is the upcoming soccer stadium. April 17th, 2027 is when we're looking at our first match. So lots going on over the next 12 months that impacts, and we all want to hear from this body. So we want to keep you all up to date and informed, and I want to get that planned out a little bit more so that we can come to you with these important discussion items. Do you want to talk about website?
Yeah, so just quick, our website has changed at the city level to a new vendor, host, operator. I'm not sure the exact word, but so that was a pretty, time-consuming effort to transition all of our stuff over to this new page. We did a decent amount of consolidation in that effort. I think our current Open Cities has been around at least since I've been here, so since 2017, probably a few years before that at the very least. So throughout that process, there are certainly errors we're trying to go through and fact check, but I just would invite this body, if you have any free time and would like to go look at our website and go, hey, we'd like this to look different. Now we move towards that sort of kind of migration effort to the improvement side. So we're looking at how these work, what is most, from a user design lens, what's the most accessible for the community. So any feedback on that is really helpful. But just wanted to call out if there are any glaring issues or concerns that folks notice. It's really helpful for us to hear about them. But again, just process improvement as well is helpful as well.
One of the cool things we have on the website is we've got some mapping cool things coming up, and one of my favorite ones is, I was just looking at our traffic calming program. We have a right? We have a map, and it shows by ward and location, so you can see what we're doing this coming summer and construction season. So that's one of my favorite ones that's out there. I am looking forward to moving from you all having a nice long list of what we're doing to go check out this map, click on this, you've got a lot of information.
One of the most heartbreaking things I've learned in this job is the community generally doesn't like maps, which I don't understand at all. Yeah, because I think they're amazing and love them, and everyone I work with thinks so, and so I don't know if the community, I don't know where this data comes from, I don't know if I believe it. But anyway, either way, I think maps are just a really important way to show the work that we've been doing, and we use them internally anyway, so taking these internal maps that we have and making them public facing is not a big lift. So being able to do that and then allow the community members who do love maps to be able to look and see and engage with all this information we have, I think is awesome. So we're really excited to start bringing those online, and then for folks who are interested to be able to look and see, okay, well, this is coming here at this time, this is how this network impacts here, this is where we have existing infrastructure, this is where this road is going to be closed for 7 months or something like that. So it's interesting to look at.
Thank you, each of you, but particularly Ken, thank you for bringing up those couple of things that led us to the other little updates we wanted to make. Anything else I'm missing that's top of mind? Right, thank you.
At this point, we do an introduction to public comment. So we're going to open up to general public comment. I will now open the floor for general public comment. The board would appreciate having the members of the public attending the meeting today identify themselves before providing comment. However, it is not required to give your name. I'll look. Hey, Wendy.
Hi everyone, good to see you. I'm Wendy Randall. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the city of Wyoming, but I work in Grand Rapids and also work with a lot of community groups in the city of Grand Rapids. Just want to plus one a couple of things that came up during your conversation today. This is the first time I've attended this commission, so I really appreciate the level of dialogue that you all are having. I think it's impressive to hear the range of priorities, and so I really appreciate that. A couple things I want to highlight. Regarding communications, I love that the communications team has been so responsive to the Essential Needs Task Force, as well as to community neighborhood groups and other residents. I love point-in-time engagement, but I also think it's important to consider the long-standing engagement and active engagement that can happen in community on a more frequent basis. So thinking about things like the library branches that are all around the community, and can there be QR codes or other ways that people can interact with Mobile GR using the spaces where people are already gathering, and having it be not always project focused, not always just we're asking this survey at this time, but maybe ongoing ways for communication to be maintained with residents. So something to think about there. I also think that placemaking has a really important role in communications. And so when I think about placemaking, I also think about wayfinding. And I know that the engineering department will say it's really hard and expensive to put signs in the ground. But I also think it's important to think about how wayfinding it can be an interactive way of communicating with our neighbors, with our residents. So thinking about those different neighborhood nodes and thinking about the development that's happening in different areas of the community, how can we also utilize wayfinding to increase pedestrian safety, to increase use of alternative modes of transportation? And then, of course, that connects to our event venues, appreciate the prioritization of micro-mobility, pedestrian safety, and other forms of mobility to get to and from events. I love the idea of bike shelters or bike garages. Amazing. Like, if people have a place where their bike's not going to get wet while they're in an event, that sounds, or their micromobility, their scooter, their e-bike, whatever that case may be. I think that's really exciting. And from the perspective of safety, I would just love for the commission to continue to not only think about safety when it comes to our kids, but also think about safety when it comes to our elders and folks with disabilities. So what are the different ways that we need to think about accessibility differently when it comes to our aging population? You know, just as people might not want to have their kids in certain spaces or trying out different things, testing their boundaries, I think for a lot of us too, our aging parents are in that group of people that we want to ensure are being safe. Thank you.
I don't really have a whole lot to, comment on right now. I've got a million ideas. I don't know if anyone has seen my face before. I do Grand Rapids content, about developments and things like that. And nowadays I live in Rockford. The wife won that one. But I lived in Grand Rapids for close to 10 years and I work right downtown across the river. But, with the amount of traffic, I guess, on all the videos that I'm doing, I hear everything that these people are thinking and saying, and the wants and needs and the misunderstandings, because I've met with other city officials that have admittedly, they've come out and said, we're not great at communicating some of this stuff to the population. And, so I do my best to kind of communicate those things to people and get out there. But I'm always willing to meet with you guys and, just kind of go over ideas and things like that. So it's been great, doing this stuff. I'm a real estate agent by trade, but real estate content is super boring, and I really like the development side of things. So that's kind of the lane that I wanted to get into. But yeah, always feel free to reach out. And thanks for letting me sit over here and just kind of chime in. So appreciate it.
Thank you. It's always great to get public comment. We see it, we either see a groundswell or a little bit or none at all. So it's nice to, get a little bit. All right, as we'll move into, any other public comment? I'll quick ask. And we'll go ahead and close that. We'll move into commissioner comments. One quick thing I want to say is if it hasn't happened already, it will. Mary is sending out my contact information. I want to make sure you all, if there's anything you're thinking about, feel free to let me know. I believe the most equitable way to get ideas for agenda topics is through the link that I think if we can get that sent out semi-regularly, if not regularly, that'd be great. So if you ever have agenda topic ideas, we do have a venue to get those in, and those are for newer members too, if you did not know. But please feel free to reach out to me too, even if it's an idea. I do, and then I had one other thought, it's gone, so now I'm going to look over to Commissioner Miguel Cipriano, and also mention Commissioner Whistling, if I can make up for, if you had anything you wanted to add.
Actually, I was able to kind of work those comments into the substantive discussion, so I'm good.
All right.
Thank you. I've got just 3 comments. First with the mobility blueprint. This isn't a personal thing against Mobile GR. I think it's like, I'm going to paraphrase like a James Baldwin quote about this country. It's like, you're able to criticize it because you love it. And so I love Mobile GR. That's why I'm serving as a commissioner. That's why I work for Mobile GR as well. And I want to just point out a shortcoming of mine in that in the earlier discussion, I might not have been as involved in it as I should have been, because now my main concern and my hesitancy here is this going to be another plan that goes on the shelf that we don't look at? That's my biggest fear with this. And I look at our city strategic plan and the values and the value of innovation. When we're talking about these consultants that come through, like, well, what have they done elsewhere? Have they done this already? And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to innovate. We're not supposed to look at someone else like, who's done it already? Someone has to be the first one. That's supposed to be us. And that's supposed to be in, I know this isn't for this group necessarily, but if innovation is not well-defined, or if we're not innovating in our values, then we should remove it. Maybe it's more of like a project or programmatically conservative value that we have. And as long as that's clearly defined, and I'm okay in moving forward with that, but it doesn't seem like that's an innovative side. Where are we innovating, and why are we not the first ones here? And so I was here during that discussion. That's a shortcoming of mine. I will take responsibility for that, for not asking more questions, being more vocal early on in the process. A second comment is on MDOT's work on, well, they wrapped the Pels in December, and work has been touted for Franklin Street Bridge. And it just seems like there's multiple little battles we're fighting on, like all these different fronts, and that's another thing. I think it's a missed opportunity. I don't know if we have connections there to do the folks over at MDOT stop answering my emails. But it is, when they first did the Pels, I talked to those folks and said that it's a really great opportunity to right a wrong that was done decades ago with the U.S. Highway Act, split communities, and now, there could have been ways to reimagine those exchanges, those bridges, 28th Street, Burton, so on. Right now, if you walk those, it's hard to walk. The sidewalks are really narrow. There's no separated protected bike lanes. That could have been just a small little sign of saying, we know, we're nodding towards the harm that we did. We disconnected these communities. There's a way now, maybe an increased, better way to cross the highway, because it's really hard. Definitely on a bike. Those of us who are only really brave can crank it up to maybe 20 plus. Will do it when it's open. So I think another one of our commissioners was talking about convenience, and the convenience we have was bought by the families that were affected in those neighborhoods and those communities that were affected by eminent domain, by the destruction of those neighborhoods. So that's the convenience we have, which will bring me to my third point of TDM. That's all designed on purpose. And a lot of people don't want to risk their lives, but we have to make these big changes, because I think it's, and I'm going to butcher this, like the law of thermodynamics, like nothing is created or lost, it's just redistributed. We're like, wow, this is really convenient. And it's convenient because someone paid for it. Those communities were broken apart. Now we're going to have to do something very inconvenient to get to a better place where we can all move around a lot easier. And so I just want us to keep that top of mind, that none of these answers that are going to get us to a good place, to where we know we should be, is going to be easy. We're going to get a lot of pushback, but we have to have that fortitude in our leadership to move forward and to know what's best. And then, of course, engage folks, but it's going to be hard, and that's, I think, a place where it's activating a lot in me right now, is this fear that we're going to do the same thing. And that's going to be really frustrating, because then in 10, 20 years, when we have the same problem, and they're going to be like, well, what happened? And we're like, well, we had commissioners like Commissioner Miguel Cipriano, who lives in the 3rd Ward, lives on the south side, and nothing happens. So we engage the community. So this is me now trying to do as much as I can to steer us away from the same thing we've always done. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Commissioner Miguel Cipriano. I agree, mostly, if not everything you said. I think avoiding doing the same thing is kind of the key for me in your comments. That's hugely important to me. I could, let's say, so for this next iteration of the Dash, or not even this year-long pilot, let's take what we learned, where we succeeded from our obviously ever-growing ridership numbers. Let's take what we learned from the Rapids' reluctancy to continue the program and avoid doing the same thing. To me, it is very hard to see equity in how we get around in our world today. I think that should always be top of mind for us. Who's using it? Who's the lowest common denominator? And how do we make this good for everyone, right? I guess I just want to always be iterating that, and hopefully that's always on the top of your mind too. So
Thanks.
Commissioner Hines? All right. Then in that case, I'll move to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.